Hello! So, if I look tired, it is because I'm starting this vlog in the evening and I am tired. But I wanted to start this vlog before I get too far into the books that I'm reading. So I have a physical book for reading during the day, an ebook for reading at night, and then I also have an audiobook for reading probably mostly while I go for runs, but also if I happen to be doing any boring housework chores. So let me tell you about the books that I'm going to be reading. Firstly, we have Foe by Iain Reid, and I have already read a couple of chapters. I'm not sure how many. I'm on page 20, not very far in. So what's happened so far is this man and this woman, they kind of live out, I think, in the middle of nowhere, and this car has showed up, and the guy in the car is like, "You've won the lottery, you get to go and live in space." But only the husband gets to go and live in space. And the wife is being really weird about it, and I'm very suspicious because the way it's written, like this visitor and the wife's dialogue are done properly in speech marks, but the husband's perspective who we're getting, he just says, like, gives a description of what he says. He doesn't actually have it in dialogue marks, and I'm just like, is he real? Is he not even... At first I thought he was a ghost, but this visitor is definitely engaging with him. But I know that something weird is going on. What I believe is going to happen is that he's going to go to space, and then some man that is exactly like the husband, some kind of clone or something, is going to still be with her. I don't know, but I feel like this is going to be a really weird book, and I'm really looking forward to figuring out what the hell's going on. So that's my physical book for the daytime. Then as well, I have an ebook for the evenings because I like to read an ebook at night. Like, it's a lot easier in bed. We can turn off the lights, Chase can go to sleep, and I can just stay up late reading without really bothering him. So what I have is Severance by Ling Ma. So this one as well, I've read the first 2 chapters of already, I think. I think in my TBR I said it was some kind of zombie apocalypse. I don't think that's right. So basically what happens is there is a plague that's sweeping the world and killing everyone off. So the prologue was basically about this girl who's our main character joining this group of survivors of the plague, and there's only like 9 of them in the whole of New York City. So then they've decided to leave the city, and then it jumps back in time kind of as this pandemic or whatever it is, this plague is starting out, and she's just going to work and struggling with her boyfriend wanting to break up with her and just like working out what she's doing with her life. And because she's got kind of these personal life struggles, she's not really engaging with the fact that this plague is starting to spread, but it hasn't really gone very far yet. So I'll be interested to see what happens. I believe that she just keeps going to work and doing work even when it's quite clear that civilization has broken down. And it also looks like we're going to get chapters both of her struggling to do her job and continue pretending everything's normal even though there's a plague, and also kind of this future where everyone's dead and they're just trying to survive. I will say, I checked the date, this was published in 2018. I checked the date and now I doubt myself. 2018, so pre-COVID, which means either it'll be interesting to see how insightful it is, or it'll be like, that's not right. From what I can tell so far, I think as well there is going to be a lot of commentary just about toxic work environments and general life struggles, and maybe not focusing so much on the plague aspect of it. But I will definitely be reading more of this tonight once I go to bed very soon, if I can get away with it. I just have to do some video editing first, but there goes the pencil again. Very soon I want to go to bed and read this because I'm really interested to see where it's going to go. Oh, and then the audiobook I have is The First Binding by R.R. Birdy. I think I'm actually about 60% of the way through this. However, it's a 40-something hour audiobook, so I still have like nearly 20 hours to listen to. I am listening on 2.5 speed now because it's a very slow audiobook. Luckily, the audiobook narrator is really great, or otherwise I think I would be really struggling with it. It's very similar to The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, except much slower, and the writing isn't really quite as beautiful. There is some beautiful writing, not quite as good as Rothfuss manages when he actually manages to write stuff. So at least Birdie is writing things because the sequel has just come out. So I guess high level, we're following the storyteller both in the present time as he's telling his past story to this woman that he's met, and he's also kind of traveling around telling stories, and he's got some secret motive in place that we're just slowly learning about. And then we're also getting kind of his story and about how he's become the person that he is, and there's some kind of like links into the mythology of the world. In the beginning I was very intrigued. At this point, I mean, it's partly my fault because I have had not much time to listen to it, and so I'm taking a long time to get through it, but also it's very slow paced, so I feel like I will have listened to 40 hours of audiobook and almost nothing will have happened. But hopefully if I go on some long runs, I can like really focus on it for an extended period of time. I think that's the best way to go into it, to feel like I'm actually getting somewhere with it. When I was listening to it in like quite little chunks, I was getting very frustrated with it because every little chunk was nothing. Oh, also this week, I'm hoping to finally join the local library because I finally got proof of address. So maybe we will also get to go to the library. Hello, so don't look too closely at my bookshelves because they are such a mess. I'm doing a separate video where I try and organize it, but honestly it's taking me forever and I just keep getting overwhelmed because maybe I have too many books or not enough shelves or something. Anyway, I wanted to update you on my reading. So firstly, I think for Foe, I'm about a third of the way through. I was just reading a little bit more before I talked to you, and it's so weird. I feel like I don't have any idea what's going on, even though in some ways it's very straightforward. We're just following this man, and this strange other guy has come and said, you're going to be going to space, and his wife is acting very strange about it. But there's just things about the way that the man is describing this situation that doesn't seem right, and the way that this other guy keeps turning up and talking about how, you know, lucky you get to go to space. Like, none of that or the way that that's happening really makes sense either. And so, like, you know something's off, but I'm just reading it, trying constantly to figure out, like, what is really going on? And I still don't know, but something just happened that I think now maybe will have something happen beyond just this man being with his wife and this other guy coming and telling them they're going to space. I think something else is going to happen now, which is good because I was kind of getting to the point where that was getting a little bit boring. So I'm ready to move on to some new mysteries. I expect whatever happens next, I still won't know what's going on, but that's just the kind of book this is. But it's fun trying to figure out what's going on, and it's still written in a way where it feels like emotionally engaging, and then that mystery gives you like the intellectual intrigue that I think is keeping me interested. So hopefully I'm going to keep liking this. The other thing, last night I got about 22% of the way into Severance. This one is not really going in the direction that I thought. I will say, I had said that originally I thought it was like a zombie thing, and then I thought, oh no, it's not. I think it is, but like not a typical zombies want to eat your brains kind of zombies, more like zombies are just hanging around. I don't know, it's not really clear yet because we've only had, like, I haven't got far. We've only had a couple of chapters in this future and then a couple of chapters in the past. We've actually gone quite far back and we're getting a bit more of this woman's history and kind of like her messed up attempts at becoming an adult. We haven't really gotten that much of her actually doing her job or like dealing with the initial spread of the plague, and that's what I thought this book was going to focus on. So I guess we'll see how much more of that we actually get once it gets into it. Another thing that's going on is kind of the leader of this group that she's with in the kind of post-pandemic world. He's really religious and she's not, and there's some weird stuff going on with that I'm not sure. Like this is another one where there's a lot going on that I don't really understand yet. There's also a lot that kind of just feels like, you know, young person struggling with life, contemporary. And that bit doesn't really interest me. Like, it's a little bit frustrating for me, and that's why I don't tend to read straight contemporaries. But it does have like this plague stuff framing it, which I guess at least still makes it more interesting. So I guess both of these are like kind of feeling very mysterious, and I don't really know what's going on with either of them yet, but I am interested to find out, I'll definitely be reading more of both of these in the next day, and hopefully tomorrow as well I can go for a run and actually get through some of the first binding because I haven't done any of that.
Lazy Sunday mornings, hiding under covers. I don't mind staying in with you. Play your favorite movie, laying right beside me. I don't mind when it's just us two. That corner coffee shop we like to go. Late night walks with you to take me home.
Hello! So I have joined the library, and you know what? In the end, they didn't even ask for proof of address, which is what I thought I needed. It said on the website I needed, so I thought I would have to wait till I had it. And then they were like, what's your address? And they just wrote it down. So that was ridiculous. But anyway, I have a library card. She gave me quite a detailed explanation of all the library stuff, even though I already know that. Also, once I got it, I realized I don't really need any books from the library right now, other than I want to put a hold on the Wisdom of Crowds, which I've done. Somebody else has that out, so hopefully they will return it. I guess we'll see. But I didn't want to just leave the library without having gotten any books, because that felt wrong for the first time when you get a library card. So I got these books in the end because these are all books I already have in ebook form, but I found them wandering around the library, so I thought, why not? So I got Harrow the Ninth. I haven't read Gideon the Ninth yet, but I'm hoping to read it, maybe not next week, maybe the week after that. And then I also got a couple of Murderbot books. To be honest, I think the copy of Network Effect that I have is from that new library that I can't get onto my Kobo for some reason. Oh, I still haven't actually tried putting the library I just joined onto my Kobo, so maybe we'll try that as well. But anyway, at the moment I have the ebook for this, but only on my phone, so it's good to also have the physical book. And then I also got Fugitive Telemetry. I'm hoping to read Murderbot next week, I think. So like none of these are books I'm reading immediately, but still kind of nice to be able to get books you're excited about from the library. And I had a wander around. They have a pretty good selection. Anyway, reading update. For, I don't actually know how much I've read since I last talked to you. I guess I'm just past halfway. I've started changing my theories about what's going on, so that's something. But do I know what's going on? No, it's all still very strange and unsettling, but it's kind of just a vibe that's quite enjoyable to read while you try and figure it out. So even though I think the reviews on this one are very conflicted, I'm having a good time with it. The other thing is Severance. I don't think I've read much of this just because this is my nighttime book and I've been falling asleep instead of reading, but there has been some really kind of dark stuff happening. I feel like this one is a real mix between the stuff that's happening kind of later in time post plague. That stuff is quite dark and twisted, and then the stuff that's happening in her life feels very different. It's more just kind of like young person disaster, doesn't know what they're doing, with a little bit of commentary, I think, about, or like what I think it's trying to make some points about is like how meaningless a lot of stuff that happens at work is. But maybe as we go it will have more depth than that. I don't know. I really just want to get to the bit where the plague is actually happening and see her reaction to it in the beginning. And I'm wondering if it's just not getting into that yet because it wants to build up a bunch of questions about this post-plague situation before kind of answering them through the plague part. I don't know. Anyway, I'm only 30% of the way through, 32, so I've still got quite a lot to go on that. Today I am trying to work on my bookshelves, which I'm doing a separate video about, but I'm going to try and because this is so overwhelming, I'm going to try and do like a little bit of this, a little bit of watching booktube, a little bit of reading, and just like rotate, because it's kind of going to be a really yucky rainy weekend. I've got my period, so like this is the time just to do nice and cozy but productive rotation-y type stuff for the whole weekend. Okay, I don't want to spoil my bookshelf organization video, but it's going pretty well. Still a lot of things that I want to change around this afternoon since it continues to be awful and rainy. But let me update you on my reading because I have made some progress. I think I'm up to page 200 and I think it's about 260 pages long, for faux that is. So this, I can see why some people haven't enjoyed this. It is getting to the point where it's quite repetitive. We keep just having this man in his house and this other man is there supposedly to prepare him for going to space and prepare the wife for this replacement or whatever's going to happen. So I feel like when I read the synopsis, or when I've heard people talk about this one, they talk about it being like, I always think it's more going to be the wife's story of having this replacement come, but we're not really getting the wife's story at all. Instead, we're getting just this man's perspective, and things are so off. So I can definitely see why, since it's so just the same thing all the time, where the wife is saying weird things and this other man is talking about space, is saying weird things, and nothing quite seems right. But there are still throughout it like little lines that you're just like, ooh, what? That's a clue. Is it a clue? I kind of still feel like I'm enjoying the vibes and I'm enjoying trying to work out what's happening, even though also nothing's really happening. So you could see that being boring, but I'm not, which is weird because when we compare it to Severance, like more is happening in Severance, but also I'm way more bored in Severance. But also the stuff that I'm bored with in Severance, I could see some other people really liking. I did actually look, and the average ratings for these two are not as different as I thought. This is 3.7, which is getting a little bit low. This is 3.9, which is not too bad. I did think maybe it would be higher based on how I've heard everyone talk about it. But anyway, there is a lot kind of just about this woman's history. She has Chinese parents, and so there's, I guess, a lot about her parents having moved from China and the influence that's had on both their lives and her life. There was like a whole chapter talking about her different uncles back in China. There's also a whole nother chapter about, actually it started out all about these like Latter-day Saints in America before finally getting to be a story of her parents immigrating to America and their story. And it's so much of just this boring, like the way it's written is very expositional, and so it's just like a bunch of like historical type fiction stuff just being dumped on me, and I don't really like historical fiction, so I'm really bored with that. There's also a bunch of stuff, I guess, about her relationship with this guy and just her struggling with life. That bit feels very contemporary. Not interested in that. What I am interested in is we got a couple more chapters, I think, of this like post-plague world, and that is the part of the story I'm really liking, even though we've had hardly anything of that part of the story. They've actually just got into a mall and they're staying in a mall, which reminds me of Dawn of the Dead, even though it's nothing like that kind of zombie story because we don't have zombies trying to eat people's brains. But it is also kind of a lot about the dynamics of the group, which is maybe similar. Anyway, that's the part of the story I'm liking. We've had maybe like 2 chapters of the plague starting, and I'm 70% of the way through, right? So that's what I was sold on this book being about. I was always told it was about this woman, and even when this plague is really getting out of hand, she's still just going to work. And so far that's only been 2 chapters, so that is not what the book is about. And I think if people had told me there was going to be so much contemporary and historical fiction elements in this book, I wouldn't have picked it up. Those bits, I'm not enjoying at all. Like, it's not that I don't enjoy the content, it's just the way it's written is so boring to me. But I'm hoping that the last third of the book, I don't know what this hope is based on, but I'm hoping the last third of the book will be a lot of this post-plague story as well as more of the plague starting. I guess we'll see. I'm going to try and finish it off tonight. It's telling me I've got a couple more hours to go, which means I might need to finish it off tomorrow because I still want to finish off my bookshelves tonight. I also want to finish off this afternoon. Also, I'm feeling kind of crap, so maybe I need to have a nap. So I guess we'll see. Hello. So I'm once again failing at keeping this to a 1-week vlog, although I think actually because I started late, it is a 1-week vlog, but the last couple of days I got a cold and so I didn't want to film. In fact, I'm still kind of feeling crappy. I don't know if my voice will sound different. It sounds different to me, but I think it's inside my head. Anyway, the main thing is that I have finished all the books that I was reading, so I want to tell you about them. Firstly, I finished off Foe. I did enjoy this. I saw the ending coming. It was one of my theories about what was going on. But for me, figuring it out doesn't necessarily take away from the satisfaction. In fact, kind of adds to the satisfaction that I'm like, ooh, I figured it out. Even though maybe it wasn't that difficult to figure out, but still, I enjoyed doing it. For me, at least, it felt like a satisfactory ending to the whole vibes of the thing. I will say it definitely dragged in the middle. I feel like maybe it could have been cut down. In fact, I think this could have been very effective as like a short story. Although, I mean, I enjoyed the vibes of it. I can see a lot of people really getting into it. But also it doesn't have that higher average rating, so maybe if it had been cut down, more people would have enjoyed it, but maybe less people would have picked it up. Anyway, the main thing is, I enjoyed it. I have seen some people say they weren't satisfied with the ending, but I really liked kind of how it was a continuation of the exploration of the relationships in this book. So it's mainly the relationship between this husband and wife. And I think if you reread this, knowing the ending, that you would read quite a lot of it in a different way. And so it's kind of like a nice sci-fi mystery type novel, but it is also I think, trying to say a fair amount about relationships and the expectations people have on each other. So I enjoyed this. The other thing I read was Severance. That one I didn't enjoy quite as much, even though it has a higher average rating. But I think because this is more of a sci-fi book, whereas Severance is more a literary type book. Yes, there is a kind of a zombie plague story happening, but it's not really your classic zombie story. It's much more about this young woman's history, and it's trying to say much more about like the monotony and pointlessness of work. It does remind me like when COVID started, and if your job, or at least in New Zealand, if you were considered non-essential, then basically you weren't allowed to go to work during the initial lockdown. And I think it was really hard for a lot of people to learn that what they were doing is non-essential. And I think actually getting that perspective has really changed a lot of people's perspectives of their work. Although I think people are now starting just to fall back into working to survive, so we have to believe it's important kind of mode, and losing some of those lessons that we had the opportunity to learn over COVID. Anyway, I don't think that Severance really tried to say much about plagues or tried to be very insightful about that. Like if I compare it to The Dreamers that I read earlier in the year, that was definitely trying to be very insightful about pandemics and plague type things, and it probably was, but because it was written pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, I didn't find it quite as impactful. So in some ways that's to Severance's benefit, because it wasn't trying to, then it didn't fail to do that. But what it did do is just spend a lot of time on the parts of the story that I wasn't interested in, and I can definitely see that other people would be interested in those parts of the story. I feel like it's trying to say a lot as well about how I don't know. I feel like it's trying to say something about people being disconnected from their family, but I'm not sure what conclusion it was really getting to. I'd have to think more about that. I do think Severance is probably a book you could think a lot about, but it's also probably not stuff that I'm that interested in thinking about. I did really like some parts. Oh, but then the ending. It was one of these books where I'm reading it on my Kobo and I push next page entirely expecting that there is going to be another chapter, and it's just the end. And what kind of ending is that? Again, I think people who like to read literary type books enjoy those kind of open-ended endings, and sometimes I like an open-ended ending, but this I just felt was so unsatisfying. Like, that's not the end. You didn't write the end of the story. And because like the bits I was interested in, like the plague starting and this post-plague survival group, those were the two parts of the story I got. And because we got so little of them, when the ending of this like post-plague survival group, the ending of that part was so cut short, it was extra disappointing because I wanted so much more of that part of the story. So anyway, the summary is, I've heard so many great things about Severance, but like it was fine. I enjoyed some bits of it, but it just really wasn't what I was expecting from what I'd heard people say about it. I really thought there was going to be a lot more about her continuing to go to work even though society was crumbling around her, and that's not really what the focus of the book was. And then the last thing that I have to talk about is the thing I'm the most sad about. So I finished listening to the audiobook of The First Binding. Is my makeup messed up? Maybe. Anyway, I listened to the audiobook of The First Binding, and in the end, I'm going to have to give it 1 star because I made a deal with myself. Basically, when we were at the bit, like halfway through, 60% of the way through, where he was being an orphan in this big city, and kind of doing some criminal activities. It was different enough from Name of the Wind that I was like, okay, even though I can see it's drawing a lot of inspiration, I can also see it's going in some different directions, it's doing its own thing. But then, not only did the plot get so slow and like nothing was happening, even though I started listening to it in bigger chunks, still, it was so slow, nothing was happening. And then we got to the magic school. And this is where I was really interested to see what was going to happen. And we rehashed Name of the Wind. The school was so similar, and it was kind of done in a way where, in the Name of the Wind, Rothfuss will really set up the school and the different kinds of magic, but it was like R.R. Verde just assumed that, of course, it'll be exactly like the school in the Name of the Wind, and he didn't even bother to explain a lot of the things, or even have the main character like experiencing the discovery of these things. So the school, like the admission procedure, is very similar to the way that the school works in the Name of the Wind. We've got this panel, and he's a little bit of a clever shit in the interview, and then there's this one like very eclectic lecturer who comes, and kind of because of him he manages to get in. There's an argument over price. There's also this rich noble at the school that he's having an argument with. One of the teachers takes him to this insane asylum where the students who have tried to learn this particular type of magic end up because it drives them all crazy. And then what happened is, in Name of the Wind, there's a scene where he's at this insane asylum, and for whatever reason he ends up going off the edge of the roof. And in the first binding, when he went off the roof of this insane asylum, I was like, you're kidding me. You did not just write that to be as similar to Name of the Wind. And I told myself at that point I knew I had to give it a low rating because it's just not doing enough original things. It's just too much of a close rehash. So at that point I told myself, if at the end of the book there is some kind of like dragon, lizard type monster that he has to fight, especially if it's like in a small village near the university, if that happens, then I have to give it 1 star because it's too much of a copy. And then it happened. And it's just the same story. There are bits that are unique. And in the beginning, I was willing to overlook it because I was like, this is a lot of just classic fantasy stuff. So even though he has constructed it in exactly the same way as the Name of the Wind, like, can't fault it too much for copying those basic tropes. But just the overall thing was way too close. And I've also read someone said that they didn't think the first book was that close to the Name of the Wind, but the second book is much more like Name of the Wind, or like the second book, Wise Man's Fear. And so now I don't even know if I want to continue the series. I think I'm going to wait to see if more reviews come out that are comparing it, because the second book's only just been released. So I'll see if more reviews are saying it's just like Name of the Wind, in which case I don't think I can read it. And it's so disappointing because I feel like it had so much potential, but it's just not doing anything original. The pacing is also the killer. Like, it's not just that it's not original, the pacing is terrible, and the writing just isn't as luscious as Rothfuss's. And sure, Rothfuss is in the bad books and he hasn't finished that series, but you know, his world building was so much more solid. I feel like there's a lot of explanations missing in the first binding, and like the main character doesn't feel as fully fleshed out, isn't going through the same character development. I'm so disappointed because I had heard good things about the first binding, but when I look at reviews now, I can see a lot of people calling it out for being exactly like Name of the Wind. And if you are loving the first binding and you haven't read the Name of the Wind, you just need to know that it's very similar. Like, not just like, it's very similar. It's the same plot, just in a different world with different characters. And it's crazy how similar it is. Like, I've never read 2 books that similar. Anyway, one thing I will say is it was a great way to like reread Name of the Wind, or like remind myself of the plot of Name of the Wind without actually having to reread the Name of the Wind, because I don't want to reread the Name of the Wind until we get the 3rd book, if we get the 3rd book. But anyway, now, having read the first binding, it's reminded me of all the things that happen in the Name of the Wind, so I don't need to reread it. So we'll look at that as a positive, but that's not what I wanted from the first binding. So I'm very sad about that. But anyway, at least I enjoyed Foe, and I did find Severance interesting. The first binding, though, I can't believe that I spent nearly a month, I think, reading that audiobook, and then I'm giving it 1 star. And I said I would DNF all my 1 and 2 star books if I could, but it wasn't until right near the end that I decided it had to be 1 star. I think if it hadn't copied The Name of the Wind, though, I probably still would have only given it 3, just because of the pacing problems. Anyway, that was my reading week. Let me know if you've read any of those books. I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments, or let me know what else you've been reading lately. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.